Well, here are some of the ribs and webs. I know this control surface closeout is super small, and I could have used like a piece of balsa, but I don't have any balsa, and I was cutting some of this sandwich panel anyway. This gets wrapped with a carbon sleeve. So does this one. I know this is like, it basically is nothing. I don't know what that is. It's 20 thou or 30. It's super, here, let me grab it closer. It's either that or you just put a bead of epoxy or you put a carbon sleeve in there, but the carbon sleeve is just sitting in there. At least this, it's got some sort of shape and body to it. So I'll wrap this in a carbon sleeve and put it in. And then on the spar, and then some of these get, like after the sleeve is cured, I'll trim the ends and I'll trim this. This gets like mitered here, right? That gets mitered, kind of like how these ribs are. And then this gets a sleeve on it. And once all that's sleeved up, there's a 60 thousandths glue gap total. So I'll glue this down tight in here and I'll have 60 thou, theoretically, a bead on top. I have to, I'm wrapping these with the carbon sleeve. It's this stuff here. So you got this little stuff for the control surfaces and this slightly larger one for the rear spar. And then I have this 1 inch for the main spar, and it'll pull down all the way down to the tip, and it'll also expand over the root area. I'm going to make that panel now. I almost was going to cut some plywood up. I love making plywood spars. Years ago, we were kind of messing around, looking at the shear properties of plywood. This is really good plywood. It's birch ply. I think there's like 13 layers in this per 3/4 inch piece. So it doesn't need a sleeve over it. It has enough shear strength. I could just glue these. Well, it only needs to be half the height, but I was going to rip these down and make a block this big, and then I could machine all the spar parts. And the spars would weigh about 1.5 pounds. But if I take this and laminate carbon, like a bunch of strips of this, and put laminate carbon in between, and then machine the spar out, and then put a sleeve over that, which is like a lot of work, right? It's a couple days of work. I was like, screw that. I'll just use plywood. I can glue that with wood glue now, and in an hour I could be machining them, right? But it's literally like over 1 pound difference for the plane. It's not, the spars aren't all that big. They're a bit wide, but they're not, you can see by the ribs, it's not that tall. And in here's the thickest area, and I think the maximum height just in this small region is about 1 inch thick, but everywhere else it just gets super thin. But it weighs about 1.5 pounds, and in this material, it'll end up weighing, gosh, 1/3 of a pound or something when it's done. So I don't want to lose the theme. I still want to make it light. I think that this is not the lightest core material either, but this H80 with carbon in between it all and then a sleeve over it, I think is more than adequate. I'm guessing, because I'm not a structural engineer, but from my experience with building these types of planes, I think it's probably adequate for this lightweight build. And so I want to keep it light, since the only thing really heavy is all the carbon that I put in the spar caps. So I'll do the work. Well, here's my setup when I was cutting all the ribs and webs. And man, those tiny control surface ones were so delicate. I can't believe I didn't break them. But it's interesting, once the sleeve was on them, they were like super stout feeling. This is the block that I made for the lightweight shear webs. The fabric on this is not on a bias, because the sleeve will handle the shear portion, but the shear web does require a bit of compression load. It has to be able to handle compression loads from that upper cap trying to buckle. Part of it wants to buckle up, but the other part wants to buckle into the wing. So, and here's the glue up for the plywood one. And I ran out of clamps, so I hope I got enough clamps on there. It was a good clamp job for sure. I like the plywood spars. You'll see in this video, I ended up making one. And then I made one of each. So it's been a 2-day grind, and I'm gonna put the sleeves on the lightweight spars tomorrow. But yeah, I still have to adjust all these ribs. Still a bit to do, but I'm getting closer. Here's a setup for wrapping the sleeves on those on the rear spar and the torque rod or the torque tube. I have a 20-pound bag of weight. Oh no, those are 10s. I have 10 pounds of weight on each one, tensioning the carbon sleeve. And man, it sure does. It gets nice and tight and compact. Those are straight parts, though. I can't do that on the main spar. Here's some of that big old block glue up I did, nice and sloppy. I found out that core, I don't know what was up with that core, but it was all different thicknesses everywhere, and it's the only piece I had, so I went with it. But I wish it were straighter. The layers in it are all kind of wavy, but it's not horrible, but it could be better. But I'm super happy with the way it turned out. It's coming out. You'll see it soon. But I put 2 layers of 3K carbon 090 between each layer of foam. Well, I wrapped it all up with shrink wrap and weighed it down flat onto the table. So it was flat, so when I started to machine it, I didn't have to remove so much. I trimmed the ends and then put them on the machine and just started flattening them out. Here's some, looks like time lapse of running the lightweight spar. I ran that one first. I was going to use the plywood one as like a setup just in case something happened, but I started machining or flattening the light one, and I just didn't want to take it off the machine at that point. So it's difficult material to cut too. I have to have a special end mill for that, and it's super loud too. It makes a lot of noise, but got it done. I'm glad I don't have to do that again anytime soon. That's the setup. I put a piece of plywood down, machined that flat, put some pins in there, and everything's basically, it pins, in the same pins on both sides. And then I machine the top, and I flip it over and machine the bottom. And when I flip it over, I'm just lowering my Z on the machine to compensate for the thickness of my skins or spar caps or whatever. So my offset is I'm just cheating the Z down and making the finished part thinner. And it worked out perfect, actually. I mean, I didn't have any problems. I didn't break anything. And the finished part was just the right size. So I'm pretty happy. It seems like every now and then I run into problems, and I definitely didn't want to have a problem with this one. With a block like that, I had to glue up like that. I mean, processing this block was harder than processing like a bunch of tooling board, and just tedious. So I was just cleaning that up so I can flip it, and then those pins are hammered down into that board. They're super tight. And those pins have threaded holes on the ends of them. So once I put this piece down and make sure it's flat on the board, I put screws in there to hold it down, and it's just enough. And then my tool path goes around those, so it stays screwed down the whole time. Here's what the part looks like after the roughing pass. Starting to take shape. And then I did the finishing pass, and then when I started to cut it out, I had to stop here because it was just like getting too much exposed, like unsupported part, so I had to stop because it was starting to chatter, and I just didn't want to break anything, so I stopped, and I used the bandsaw to cut the pieces from the block, and then I used an edge sander to just clean up the rest of the edges. This is the plywood part roughed out, and I just love machining the plywood. It just cuts clean, and it's just easy to work with. So this is the cutout pass after the part's finished. I'm just profiling around it to cut the parts free of the block. I was able to go a little bit more on this one compared to the other because it's like, harder, tougher material. It doesn't break so easy. Well, here's the plywood part that I made. It's sitting in the lower tool because the upper tool has the lightweight one in it. So that's the backup. That'll be, if this flies well, I'll make a heavy, and this will go in. The thing I like about the plywood is that they just drop right in. They're good enough in shear and compression that once they're off the machine, you just glue them straight in. You don't have to pull any sleeve over it or nothing, so it's nice. Well, here's the setup. I still have some final trimming to do and adjustments on some of the ribs. I can't do that until the spars are glued in. This stuff fitting real nice. Everything's nice and flush. It fits into the molds nice. I also checked it into the lower tool, and it just, everything's fitting real good. You can get an idea how thick this wing is or how thin it is now by looking at some of these shapes. I think I know where I'm putting my battery and receiver. I'll go over that soon, but everything's just looking real sweet. So I'm gonna get those sleeves on tomorrow, and then start gluing them in as soon as I can. So I took a couple pictures of these shear webs on the scale versus the other ones, the plywood ones on the scale, but for whatever reason, they're showing up sideways, even though they're not sideways in my phone, in my gallery. But so I'll just tell you, all of these combined shear webs, they don't have the sleeve on them yet, but they weighed 4.45 ounces. versus 20.5 ounces for the plywood. So a pound different, and I'm probably going to add, I don't know, a few ounces with the sleeves. So looking good.